points.
Right, we'll be taking questions from the left to the right, so if you could just raise your hands and a paddle will be there for you. And just your name, the company you represent, and the question. So we'll keep it short and succinct. So on the left-hand side, we'll be passing you the mic.
Daniel Low, I'm from Dato Paul Lau's office. Question to Tan Sri about the sustainability. You mentioned it twice in some of your answers. One of the measures of certainly for sustainability should address the issue of upward income mobility of the less rich, and also decreasing the income disparity between the rich and the poor. I was just wondering, what's PEMANDU, how does PEMANDU measure that, if that's something that PEMANDU does, and what initiatives does PEMANDU do towards that? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. The first thing that was done was under NKRA, low-income household. We began that work under the GTP. We identified everyone who's poor, the hardcore poor. When we first started in year one, we had 54,000 families in this country who are in the hardcore poor bracket. That means don't enough food to eat. We reached out to every single one of them and got them out from that category. And then of course they're vulnerable poor. And so there's a lot of activities. The program that we have under the low-income household is Satu Azam. That means the element that's deal with agriculture, giving them all the aids required to help them in that area. And then Azam Kerja, finding jobs for them. So that's the third one is about Azam Niaga, small businesses, and Azam Hidmat. So these are the four components of that. So quite a lot of people. We have a list of 187,000 families that actually graduated from a lower category over the last 4 years. We monitored them by under the eKasi program. We know exactly what they are. We register them. We monitoring their levels of income. So that's one. The other issue that has to attend to that is the rural sector, the inclusivity, sustainability. A lot of the people that are poor in this country are in the rural sector, particularly in Sabah and Sarawak. And one of the key things that is needed there is to provide basic infrastructure, simple roads that connect to them under our rural basic infrastructure. For what it's worth, we have built over the last 4 years under the GTP program 4,600 kilometers of rural roads. For those who know the geography, that's a distance from Johor Bahru all the way to Myanmar. And that's quite a distance that we had to build that. Electricity and etc. These are helping that. The third one activity that was done to deal with this was minimum wage. When we looked at the poverty line index for Peninsular Malaysia at 900 ringgit, we concluded that we need to lift everyone outside poverty line index. In Sabah and Sarawak, because the salaries were so low out there, and we put a lower minimum wage at 800 ringgit. Now the point was this. Just by one stroke of policy decision that the government took, 3.2 million people were lifted out from poverty line immediately. I know there was tremendous, aggro in trying to do this, but we nevertheless did it in January. We managed to pull those people out. 3.2 million people lives actually have greatly improved because they're no longer below the poverty line. That is good. Now, women is another issue, our inclusivity. And how do we make sure that a lot of women are participating in the workforce? Many of them do. Actually, they are smarter than the men today. Their grades at university are better than the boys. But many of them, obviously, some of them, when they are in the childbearing age, they get back to, they then stay at home. But we are now encouraging a lot more employers to become a lot more flexible in their policies to encourage part-time working and sabbatical and etc. All sorts of things like to get a lot more women inside the workforce. Now, for Malaysia, these are many, many things we still need to do. I would say today, an area that we really struggle in Malaysia is urban poor. And I really find this a real challenge. And if you, outside Masjid India, every week on Wednesday, we gather all those homeless people out there. And they come for the food that we grant to them. But really, many of them, they don't want jobs. I remember we got 10 of them 2 years ago. They were given jobs in Ajinomoto. They went to the factory, we gave them bars, we gave them housing. But after 5 days working in the factory, they all left, having stolen the mobile phones of their colleagues. But the issue here is that it's a lifestyle that they've chosen. And some of the successful NGOs have been really helpful in trying to build the spiritual aspects of them. And so that's why we in PEMANDU, we're working a lot more now with the NGOs to reach out to a lot of this, the urban poor. And this is a challenge for us. Greater KL, we have 6 million people in Greater Kuala Lumpur. By the year 2020, we envisage that it will become 10 million. By the year 2020, Malaysia's population will be 31 million. If 10 million are in Greater KL, that's a third of every Malaysians are here. So if you have a third of every Malaysians are in Greater KL, we've got to improve our game in dealing with the urban poor. It's a lot better than we do today, and I think there's a lot of lessons learned from the various NGOs that are doing a lot of good work here. And so we're reaching out to them and see what we can do and work together with them and dealing with this. But the world over, I would say today, is a challenge everywhere to deal with disparities. And that is a concern for us in Malaysia, and we're reaching out the best we can. We're not perfect. It's work in progress. There's a lot more things that we still need to do in that area. We shall not give up on it.
Right. Okay. Over there first. Thank you.
Greetings. Peter Shepherd from Credo Trust. I'm afraid my question is also directed to Dato Sri. It is about teachers' wages, salaries. You just talked about women teachers. I think there are more women teachers than men too as well, but and there are no women on the panel today. But anyway, my concern is, that when you benchmark against teachers in other countries, they're paid so much better. And our best doctors, engineers, doesn't matter. They were taught. And I think, just like your comment is, how can we uplift the professionalism of teachers without, a professional level of pay? Thank you.
I totally agree with you, but we have to take it step by step. You shouldn't pay the guys who are no good a lot of money too. And so, but there's a transition we have to take. And you have to pay top dollars to get good people. There's no doubt in my mind. In one of the 11 shifts for the National Education Blueprint, we'll have to re-examine the entire remuneration system for the teachers. And that, I think, is a very important part of what we have to do. We need to get good quality teachers, and if money is what it takes, and that's what we do. For what it's worth, it's important to know today that if you want to become, if your sons and your daughters want to become teachers, the starting pay for teachers is actually better than many, many other professions in government. Higher than, I think, even an engineer. And some of you don't believe it, it's true. But so, sometimes the pay is there, but the conditions, the working conditions need to be right too. There's a lot more beyond the pay, and that's what I wanted to mention. The working conditions has to be right, the pay needs to be good too, and etc. But there's a lot we need to do on education. I couldn't agree with you more with you that the need to make sure all things we need to do. There is no shortcuts on education. We have to really, really work and to get this one going for the future of Malaysia. That's critical.
Right. We have another question there.
Thank you. My name is Zaid Ibrahim, made in Kelantan. I'm also directing my question to you, sir. We have got a consistent change of policy. Every time we have a new prime minister or a new education minister, in a very fundamental way, our education policy changes. My question to you is, what is it that we have today that's going to show us that this policy, this blueprint, this commitment that you have and the Prime Minister has is going to stay? Because, as you can see, our English, science and maths, when the Prime Minister changes, we change that. When we have Malay, English, do you remember the national schools in those days? It was different, and then suddenly we got into all Bahasa mode and all that. So I just want some reassurance that these things will stay. My second question, if I may, is just this. Because we are going global, I remember asking someone from the government, if I want to go global, not that I am, but what kind of help would you give me? Because you have MIDA, who's going to have a lot of people coming here. So if I'm going out, is there any help? Is there any organization, or is it PEMANDU that I should go and see Dato Idris? I just want to know that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. As far as I'm concerned, I do accept the comment that you made, the constructive comment that we should stick to our policy on education and don't actually willy-nilly one fine day wake up in the morning decide to change it. And that's why the national blueprint is a much longer term frame. And it has not a 5-year program, it's a 20-year time horizon that we're looking at it. That said, it is important to think about education in 2 broad categories. The first category is the curriculum and the teaching method. That's the one that everybody wants to keep on changing every time you think about it. What doesn't change is the quality of teachers. That's a category. The operational side of implementing it. As I said, we have the same curriculum. How come Ululuba is better than all other schools in Sabah and Sarawak? That's nothing to do with different curriculum. Exactly the same books, the same curriculum, the same teaching methods, but the students are better. So that's in the second category. That does not change. And I think it's critical for us to make sure that category works for us. I was schooled in a very different teaching of English. We all were taught grammar before. What is a gerund, what is a past perfect tense. Today, the kids don't learn that stuff. But I wouldn't say my kids are any worse than me in terms of command English language. They were taught differently. But I think we should stick with the way in which we do it, and hopefully this time round, when we put the education blueprint, having spent a lot of effort thinking it through, and I think we will stick with that. Now, for those people that want to go abroad, come to any one of us. I think the best port of call is Madrid, really, if you want to do that, and MIDA. But come to PEMANDU. We are only a small unit, about 100 people in my team. But if you have any difficulty, please call us, no harm. But the first port of call is MIDA and also Madrid. They have offices in a lot of countries, 100 countries across the globe, and that's a good starting point. But I do want a lot of Malaysian companies to start thinking beyond our shores, because that is the future. That's the market that we really have to gun for.
Can I quickly just add? I think that you're asking about how do you ensure that some of these reforms stay. One of the things that has been very important is the fact that Malaysia is benchmarking itself internationally, that it took part on the PISA test in 2009 and 2012, and the results were not great, but that's the only way that you know that you're not doing so great and you need to improve. And you should not be embarrassed of that. I mean, I think that in Asia, people who are worried about losing face, but sometimes that's the way that we don't improve, is that if we don't confront what problems that we have and actually try to move them forward. So I would encourage that you should continue to measure yourselves, benchmark yourselves internationally, and then, if you're doing worse in Vietnam, let's figure out why, and then let's improve the performance. And similarly with English, I mean, I think that, as I said already, you have to keep measuring the level of proficiency and put it out there for people to see. And if the numbers are a little bit embarrassing, then that will prompt people into action.
Right, we'll take some questions from here first. Right.
Nick Zephyrs with the American Malaysian Chamber of Commerce. I serve on the Research Advisory Committee of the University of Malaya. At the most recent meeting, they announced that their research budget funding from the Malaysian government has been cut by 50%. 50% cut across the board for all research and development in Malaysia universities. We can talk and talk and talk about the future, but if you cut research and development in a country that already is one of the lowest in the world in R&D, and you think about these researchers that have started projects that are going to have to stop, the research projects that will never get underway, and the momentum that is broken, where's Malaysia going on R&D?
Good question. Let me put by saying this. We set up an institution called AIM, Agency Innovation Malaysia, and that's under the Prime Minister's Department. The first thing that they did at the time was they looked at all the research already done in Malaysia. I remember the book we had something like 100 or 3,000 projects. All deliverables that over the years are already there. So a lot of ideas. And then we received all of those 3,000 ideas that came out through all those research, through academia, narrowed it down to 1,500. And those were then examined, and close to 500 were really, we think they have scope for commercialization. Already what we've already making the most of what we already have. Now some of those fine examples are, you know, University Kebangsaan, Malaysia, they came with the right DNA so that they can now get the chili padi to ripen at the same time. So that is actually figuring out how to move the next mile, putting the money into commercializing those research, rather than do further research to come with another 5,000 projects that they don't have a hit rate for commercialization. And so that is the crux of what we're trying to do. Try to bring those many, many good research that were already there to bring them to fruition. And so there's another example of research being done already done in the USM, University of Science Malaysia, where there is a small kit, almost like the pregnancy kit. That using that, you can use this in rural places, and then you don't have to send the test to laboratory and for quite a number of tropical diseases. Can you imagine if we can then convert that, move that to become, to commercialize that, how big a market that is in Africa, in Latin America, and many other places. So there are so much of what we're doing today is to try, we're moving the money towards that area to try and commercialize this. And even in the private sector, another good example is the KL Sports Medical Center, Dr. So and the team. I think they are the most avant-garde country in the world on stem cell treatment today. And because they found out with atrophy, that means you harvest the existing cells from an individual, but with atrophy, that means you then simulate an injury around the arm, if that was the tennis elbow, for example, and then you put the stem cells. The technology is very, very advanced. His lecturers who taught him in UK, they are now coming here to learn from him. And some of the other people are coming out here. So Malaysia is already very avant-garde in a number of those areas. What we need to do is that we are now having to refocus the money that's available into applied research to bring them into the extra mile, the additional mile to make them commercialized. That said, we will always look for the opportunity for more research, but I think I'm less of interested in pursuing academic research that point to further research to be done for further research. We should then figure out how do you do real research that can help us bring it out for commercialization. So therefore, that I think is that's the crux of what AIM is trying to do.
Well, that makes a great lead up to my question, actually. My name is Eliza from Essence Person Mastella. I noted that GE is the main representation for corporate on this panel, and Dr. Sander, of course, brings the global financial perspective on how Malaysia is doing. I was very piqued by the development from the Pathfinder program about tripartite cooperation between the government, the private sector, as well as academia. So is there something in the works about developing the talent that companies require now to globalize rather than maybe pay off that's further down the road? Because the Pathfinder program seems to pay off very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, it's, that's why we're having this conversation. I'm trying to get as much ideas from around so that we become part of the contribution to policy. I do believe that we really need to figure out how to do the tripartite work and scale that up. Get the academia involved, the industry and government. Currently, we spend a lot of money actually on vocational training, but they're not successful in the way that I painted the story around the Penang Skill Development Center. And I think that's a really good way to do it. So I think we can scale this up. I think there's tremendous scope for doing it. Returning back to companies, I think you can't go and develop talent for the sake of developing just like that. It cannot come in vacuum. Let's say company A, they produce product C. They should ask the question, who is the competitor abroad? If the best competitor abroad is a German company that produces that, All day and all night you look at that and rip it apart and open every aspect of the German product. Check whatever they're doing. That's what Hyundai is doing. And that's exactly what Samsung is doing. They look at Apple all day and night. We should all day and night look at the competitor and examine the functionality and the speed of that product, everything. That is what Nick Azam is doing. For the last 7 years, he spent 16 hours a day figuring out the tube amp that the Germans produce and the Americans produce all day long, figuring it out. How do I do better welding? How do I then do better circuitry? All sorts of things to figure it out. And that, if you don't get the best welder, find the best welder. And if you have to get electrician to do it, get electrician. The key here is that until and unless the company come with the right customer value proposition, translate that to product specification, you cannot develop the kind of people require. So returning back to the point, take the example of that company. If you really need the best people because you now figure out what product you need to do to be the German company, then you can go down and say, I need to send so and so to this Penang Skill Development Center. It cannot be taken in vacuum. It needs to be taken at the shop floor. Management has a key role to play and to figure it out. You begin with a customer value proposition for the product, then you train the people. It cannot be done in isolation, in a smoke-filled room, in a theory like that. You really need to bring it down at the core phase for innovation to exist.
Go back to the left side.
My question is directed to Dato Sri. This is regarding fiscal consolidation. I would agree that in terms of the importance of having to rebuild fiscal policy buffers, and I also see that the fiscal deficit has been narrowing to now 3.9%. I've also taken note that the consolidated fiscal deficit, including the NFPEs, is actually a very wide 9%. So my question to you is that, have you really rebuilt the fiscal buffers? And can you please shed a bit more light as to the NFPEs? What are they all about? Should be concerned because the consolidated fiscal deficit is actually 9%. And a lead-on question to that is, how much debt do these NFPEs have? And is this a form of contingent liability for the government? Thank you.
Yeah, we in Malaysia, we follow the IMF definition of what constitutes debt and etc. We follow strictly the IMF definition, like most countries. So our data, if you like, when we say we're below 55%, 53 point something, that is the official definition that applies across the globe in comparing them. So other countries too. So other countries that they have off-balance sheet items as well, they are excluded from the chart. Even if you did so, our numbers are still way below quite a number of the alarming other countries. So even if you added 9% on top of it, if that was the correct number, and it's still well below the 100%, the 80% as you see other countries. The key point for us is that Frederico just reminded me just now, very important. Just like I described the story about household debt, you need to have household asset. So if you have government debt, you need to have assets that are backing it. They must be healthy. So we need to store, if you like, very good government assets, national assets that are healthy. And if those are toxic, then you are in trouble. You need to make sure that they're healthy rather than toxic. And one of the things that we're doing today is making sure that we focus on the 12 NKEs, because we believe that all the 12 NKEs, Malaysia has inherent advantages in those areas. And chances are, if we put our investment in those areas, chances are those assets will become a lot more positive rather than negative. And so I'm of the view that we are on the right path today. And clearly, we're not out from the woods yet. We are still, by the end of this year, we're planning to bring our fiscal deficit down to 3.5. That's the target. And by the year 2015, next year, we bring it down to 3, and gradually. So we are deliberately putting some tough targets, but we are committed to doing that and ensuring that we do deliver them. Of course, the game is you deal with the numerator or denominator. If you grow the economy a lot bigger, then of course that's a good thing. The good news is that for 3 years running, our government position, our government revenue has achieved record highs. Last year was record, previous year was record. So that's why when you grow the economy bigger, you have a record government revenue, you can cut your deficit. Of course, people can say today, if you wanted to have a surplus next year, we could do that. We go and cut down a lot of our expenditure, but we don't invest, but then sacrificing growth. We need growth as well. And so it is obviously one thing for us to simply say, let's simply go and then want to have a quick surplus when you ask the oil companies to produce more oil and gas out from the ground, immediately we're in a surplus. But that's not the sustainable way to do it. So because you sacrifice future reserves. And that's why we're telling Tan Sri Samsul and others, they need to be out there looking for more reserves abroad to then deal with the one we already have. We have 35 perhaps years or so of future reserves for us, but they are really doing a great job. Petronas helping us do a lot more of that, the acquisitions made in Canada and etc. So I think the assets is key. So returning back to the point, healthy assets that is associated with the debt levels, and that's very important for us, and focusing on those sectors to make that happen.
Can I quickly just complement that? I think that I agree. I mean, a lot of the deficit of the NFPs are actually investments, right? Petronas really scaled up its investment over the last few years. And investments means that you're also building assets. So I think that you'd have to see both of them in context. I think that what would be useful in the longer term is to have more transparency and disclosure in terms of what are some of the overall asset position of the government, what is the overall consolidated debt position of the NFPs. So this is something that can be tracked over time.
Right. We'll start with some questions over there. Again, just the name, the company you represent, and the question. Are there any questions on the left-hand side? Nope. Here, right. Okay, we'll take the one at the back first.
Hi, my name is Lynn.
Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Lynn. I'm from Mesa Worldwide. We represent international exhibitions around the world. My first question is to be directed to GE, Stuart. We know that GE participates in a lot of international exhibitions, and this is one way that GE goes global. So I'd like to pose the question to also the Malaysian companies into considering that they should go for international exhibitions. But for GE, why do you go for international exhibitions? And why do you think that this is a good platform for any company, for that matter, to be part of such international exhibitions? Second question is then to Dato Sri, in which he says Malaysians should go global. So we think that, using exhibitions as a platform in order for them to want to go global, because we just recently brought 14 Malaysian companies with Madrid to the largest IT exhibition, in which they paid 86 million ringgit in just that 5 days. So if that's possible, I think a lot of the Malaysians here can also use that as a platform. Thank you.
Great. The exhibitions are a key part of our annual marketing budgets. The obvious reasons are to obviously find new customers, meet with existing customers. It's a great networking opportunity. We'll also use it to introduce new products, new services. We'll be exhibiting later this week, obviously at the Offshore Technology Conference, sponsored by Petronas. First time it's here in KL, I believe, and we'll have a major position there. So it's a key part of our overall marketing.
Well, I agree with you. A lot more of the local companies should be out there, and you are speaking my lingo. Let's do it.
Okay, let's just keep the question relevant to today's topic, yeah? We have a question from the lady up front.
My name is Yokpi. I'm from Lego, Malaysia. Actually, I'm not giving any questions. Just an observation that I see today. Talking about the talent, we know that teacher is very important, but have we done the recruitment right? because from where I came from last time, I will hear that my moms or my teacher, they will tell me, your result is so good, you shouldn't be a teacher. Don't apply the marked up guru one. Yeah, you should be somewhere work in GE or Samsung, a big company. Yeah, so what am I referring to is, yes, I appreciate that the salary of teacher has increased. We are paying them well, but has the government produced, or not the government, or even the society, have we produced a conducive environment to make teacher as a profession that being respected by the people, by the society? Instead of just increasing the pay, I don't see it's really help to make it as a good profession that being respected. Yeah, thanks.
I fully agree with you. I want to cite one story about Teach for Malaysia. I don't know whether anyone Teach for Malaysia here. They're a fantastic small group of young people who decided to create this movement to get a lot of really vibrant and young people who believe teaching is a calling. And so they're out there, and fantastic. I became a teacher one day. I went to a school and I went to teach English. And so you can see that program, there is tremendous, there are people out there who would want to become teachers, provided you create the environment for them to feel that this is worthwhile calling. And so I do believe that I would have not given up hope. During my time, I had some fantastic teachers when I was a kid. And so if I imagine some of those teachers, they're really very, very good. And here in Malaysia, we have some really fantastic teachers amongst the 400,000. But of course, I do agree with you. That's related to the comment that gentleman behind said too. Yes, we can improve the pay, but the working environment and making sure that the self-actualization and the pride of being a teacher is also part and parcel. For parents out here, please, don't ask all of your bright kids to just become doctors and engineers to work for GE. Get them to become teachers as well.
I'm sorry to sound like a broken record on this, but if you move more of the decision making to the schools, that means that you're actually also empowering the teachers. And that is also something that kind of helps improve the satisfaction of the teaching profession beyond the salaries. So this issue of decentralizing education is also something that is very important, including for motivating the teachers.
I know there were some questions. Yeah, the gentleman there.
Good morning. My name is C.H. Lim. I'm a freelance project management consultant. I just want to pick up on what Mr. Stuart Din mentioned about the TPPA. I just wonder, I'm puzzled as to why the government is pandering to all these objections and so reluctant to push ahead with this TPPA. And already it's not as though that there's no precedence. We have free trade agreement with China, and China is a factory, big factory, and we are not scared of them coming in with zero tariffs. And we have free trade agreement with Australia and ASEAN, right? A case in point is that right now I'm trying to bring in a very innovative building system from Canada, and it's like a chicken and egg situation. And this system actually, there are a lot of people interested in this system. Right now we are in a massive affordable housing building program, yeah. And there are a lot of interest in this product, but they say that, well, you haven't got any track record in Malaysia. You have to bring in this product and prove it here. Okay, but the next thing is when I go to the customs department, this product actually attracts 20% plus 10%. And that itself already is a non-starter for me. I can't bring in because of the tariffs. Yeah. So I'm really wondering, why is it that if you want to go global, why is it so, we're so scared to open up the market? I mean, the best man wins, yeah? I mean, if the car import duty is a sensitive issue, that's a very good example, right? If we want to be globalized, let's open it and let the best man win.
All right, thank you.
I think other people can have comments. My view is that the reason why the TPP is taking a lot longer than the normal free trade agreements is because there are 12 countries involved. So when you have many countries involved, they look at their own interest in the negotiations. And also there's because when you're negotiating, you can't go and declare to the world exactly what you're negotiating, because negotiations mean you have to tapok samla. And so there is an element of people, what are you not declaring? But there are issues that most countries put on the table. In our case, in the case of Malaysia, we are concerned to make sure that our Bumiputra policy is kept. So there's some questions about carving that out. And there are issues around intellectual property, particularly in the health sector, and the intellectual property rights. The US are saying that quite a number of generic medicine, for example, they would like to extend the intellectual property beyond a particular tenure, which a lot of the medicines today, in the next 5 years or so, the IP rights are expiring. But if you extend it further, and there's a lot of issues around even the dispute resolutions, the international dispute resolution under TPPA, any private can sue governments across the world. And so government procurement. So those are some of the things that we, from our side, are considering. We want to join the TPPA on the terms that we consider are favorable to us. If you look at the US, they are also having their own agenda too on agriculture and many other areas that they are interested. So when you start negotiating 12 countries coming together to produce a high quality multi-country trade agreement, it's a challenge. But I do believe that if we get it right, it's really good for the country. And so we have to make sure that all of the negotiations that we come out there, we know what we want, our mandate is clear, our negotiating teams look at the interests of Malaysia, but we need to transition going forward, and so other countries. And if we come up with a high quality TPPA that is good for the world and good for Malaysia, we want to get them. We want to get it. But we need to make sure our mandate is clear.
We have time for one more question.
Thank you, gentlemen. My name is Ravinder Kaur. I'm a banker. Now, to compete globally, Malaysia needs to create competitive and comparative advantages. The reality is that today, in Malaysia, the development of our SME entrepreneurship has been hampered by a lack of skills and knowledge, limited resources for innovation and technology development. And every country considers their SMEs as the future corporates that would drive investment, jobs, and demand, of course. Okay. So my question here is that in our reforms, apart from creating a real-world curriculum, how can the government create an effective focus to have hands-on training, vocational training, like you mentioned in Penang, but that's more piecemeal. Why can't we have it nationwide in communities like what US is doing now, Race to the Top, and they're having a lot of partnerships. Obama is not just putting the house in order, he's ensuring that corporations now work together with universities, colleges, and training centers to come up with the proper curriculum, hands-on training, and at the same time to follow the German model of a good apprenticeship system. Because by doing so, we would create specialized skills, to produce, like what you mentioned, the Kelantan case, specialized high-quality products and services. All right? Thank you.
We have many institutions in this country that does vocational and specialized training. As I said, 1,000 over with government funding. So there's no short of what we're doing today. There's Penang Skill Development Center. It's just one small example. But I think we have to improve the game for all thousands of them. There's work being done to examine them. It is an assessment, a baseline assessment has been made. A committee headed by DPM actually has been looking at this for figuring out how do we move forward and try to upgrade and improve the quality. And I agree with you that we do need to deal not just the academic side of it, but the vocational side of it. We've looked at the German models. A team has gone out to Germany to look at how they do it. And the South Korean model, if you look at the German model, there are a lot of them focus on the SME, innovation in the SME. with the South Korean model, they went out to the large companies. So we can do both. We can pick some of what they do in Germany. They encourage a lot of that happening at the SME level. But at the same time, we can also learn how to take a lot of what they do in South Korea to go forward. And for me, and I will make the piece here, and I don't think people will wonder why I say it. It would be really great to see some of our GLCs really start moving away from the conventional, traditional activity, but moving into the more sexy stuff. And so really figuring, because they have the money to do it. And after all, the conventional stuff is, people call it crowding out. Why don't we take some of that money and really move into the more high-tech area using the GLCs? Returning back to the point that you made here before, I think structurally in Malaysia, a lot of parents are now encouraging their kids to go and become an engineer and doctor, to become salaried. Actually, it's okay to fail, you know. You know, if you look at people who you can graduate but come out and do small businesses. So I think if you then have a large group of people who have a degree but come out to do small businesses, that's okay. Rather than all of us, you know, wanting to get the salaried jobs. And so a lot of people ask, how come there are not enough Bumiputra entrepreneurs? How do you have a lot of Bumiputra when everybody who's a graduate and does well want to become a head of a GLC? And obviously, when you have to do that, there are many good, successful Bumiputra, but they are salaried professionals. So if you then get many of them who will start at small businesses out there, then you have an outcome that's looking very different to what we have today. But that's a structural issue about how do we move as a country. Necessary to do, but it's a lot more. I'm not whinging here, by the way, but I'm saying that as a country, I sat down in the World Economic Forum looking at other countries. They have the same difficulties as we do. But the point is, what do we do as a country? What do we then do to move forward and step out to do it? It's a collective effort. The government have to do it, companies have to do it, parents have to do it too. And that's how the spinning wheel will happen.
Thank you, Dato Sri, and thank you everyone for your questions. And of course, the gentleman here, on behalf of the team at ETP, we'd like to ask Dato Sri to present a memento, firstly to Dr. Frederico Gilsander from the World Bank. And of course to Stuart Dean, the CEO of GE Southeast Asia.